Hello, everyone, and welcome to Literary Tales. I'm your host, Paul Krause, and in this episode, we're looking at the Theology of Love within the great plays of William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare is the greatest dramatist of all time. I said it. Admittedly, as a student, I didn't give much consideration to the Bard of Stratford-upon-Avon when we first read him. We read Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, Julius Caesar, and Macbeth, but the plays weren't entirely meaningful to me as a high school student as they are now. Today I see the great wisdom of Shakespeare and why we should read, love, and wrestle with the greatest bard who ever lived. If there is a single theme that Shakespeare's many plays deal with, be they the historical plays, the tragic plays, or the comedic plays, it is the reality of love. Perhaps it is unsurprising when we think about it. We cannot go ourselves living our own lives without dealing with the reality of love in the world. It becomes clear upon reading Shakespeare's reflections on love in his many plays that the dramatist was exceedingly well read. Touchstone, for instance, in As You Like It, espouses a materialistic or an Epicurean view of love, indicating that Shakespeare had a knowledge of the ancient classics and ancient views of love. Love is what the body, the material body, needs and desires. This view of love is contrasted with the wholesome romantic ideal revealed by Rosalind and Orlando. And then, of course, the romantic love of Rosalind and Orlando stands in stark contrast to the most famous romantic love duo in Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet, whose romantic love was ultimately tragic and led to their death. Love, therefore, is both hopeful and tragic. It is redemptive, it has a spirit of hope, but it can also lead us down the path of death, destruction, and unfulfillment. Scenes of marriage and courtship likewise dominate Shakespeare's corpus. In the midst of tragedy and destruction, death and bitterness, the hope and the redemptive power of love appears as the one shining light, calling us home, even if not all of the characters necessarily experience that rapturous bliss offered in love. And this is the great contrast that Shakespeare builds for us through his plays. He shows us how various philosophies of love, intoxicating as they might be, lead to unfulfillment, even death and destruction. Meanwhile, there is one form of love in his many plays that bring us hope, redemption, and new life. The relevance of reading Shakespeare as someone who had great knowledge of Christian theology is something that all of us, as educated readers, should be aware of, whether as adults or students. And of course, there is a plethora of great scholarship on this topic. Lee Osser's recent book, Christian Humanism in Shakespeare, is a great place to start. As such, I will briefly touch on why we should read Shakespeare in the light of theology by examining the role of love in several of his plays. I have opted for the tragic romance of Romeo and Juliet because that is one of the most universally read plays that has also seeped into popular culture in a myriad of ways. And even though we tend to read it in a yearning and romantic sense, that work actually serves as a cautionary tale of the danger of love. I have also chosen what I consider the quality of redemptive love in Henry V, wherein our supposedly good Christian king finally embodies Christian charity only at the end of the play through his encounter with Princess Catherine. Finally, love as representing hope is the great spirit that governs The Merchant of Venice, though we don't necessarily think of the tremendous importance of love in that play, even though we should. That Shakespeare was a dramatist wrestling with Christian theology should not be shocking. He lived in a Christian time, in a Christian era, where Christians were engaged in all the primary edifices of writing, publishing, and drama. The love that Shakespeare inserted into his plays, influenced by both Christian and classical visions of love, was also meant for the audience, an ostentatiously Christian audience, to wrestle with. The many references to Jove or Juno just underscore how significant late Renaissance writers were influencing Shakespeare. Shakespeare, however, doesn't celebrate the materialistic view of love offered, for instance, by the Epicureans and being revitalized and re-promoted in society by certain Renaissance authors. Touchstone, again, does not bring the resolution to as you like it. He is left ultimately unfulfilled, because a love predicated purely on the body and not also the soul cannot bring contentment and happiness. Likewise, Antony and Cleopatra die in their play. While their play forces them to die because of historical reality, we also see how the problem of a purely materialistic, sex-crazed view of love, which Antony and Cleopatra has, cannot ultimately bring about our serenity in a world destined to dungy death and destruction. And this now leads us to our most infamous of Shakespearean lovebirds. Romeo and Juliet is, perhaps, the second most famous play that Shakespeare ever wrote, only after Hamlet. It is a teen favorite and has many cultural lives living on in film and opera, serving as the basis for West Side Story and even The Lion King 2, Simba's Pride. The ill-fated love of Romeo and Juliet is stated quite clearly when Romeo declares early on in the play that love is a madness, a form of insanity, implicitly revealing his own enslavement to passion rather than rationality and the sacrificial love that reason demands for the beloved. He simply wants, he has pure appetitive desires. He is a materialist. While we know the feuding families are also to blame in the death of Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare's symbolism is on full display for the careful reader, which, however, is often missed. This is not a tale of love gone awry purely because of ancient squabbles. This is a love gone awry that reminds us of the fall of man in the Christian tradition. Romeo seduces Juliet from below while she is above on the balcony. Romeo is in a garden amongst fruit trees, an orchard reminiscent of the Garden of Eden. He successfully captivates and captures her. Later, rather than acknowledge the light of love from above, Juliet's statement that if love be blind, it best agrees with night, signifies the darkness of lust, the lust that Romeo and Juliet are now set on. Juliet falls for the madness of passions that has also gripped Romeo. Our adult characters, who should provide wisdom, the light from above, to our young lovers, also fail. Rather than shepherd them, as he is supposed to do, Friar Lawrence hastily seeks to marry Romeo and Juliet, without telling anyone, even though love and marriage is meant to be a public celebration. Capulet sees his daughter as a tool for purely political gain, preferring an arranged marriage far away than the possible healing of their own hometown. Shakespeare cautions against the rash of romance without sacrifice and rationality, something that we find in stark contrast to the romantic love exhibited by Orlando and Rosalind in As You Like It, the other great duo of romantic love in Shakespeare. Romeo and Juliet experience their fall, and the penalty of the fall is death, as Shakespeare brilliantly crafts for us, however sympathetic Romeo and Juliet are. Both are not innocent of their fall and demise, as most modern interpreters want you to believe. Hence the fact that it is a tragedy and not a romance. If the love of Romeo and Juliet cautions us against the madness of passion, a symbolic retelling of the fall, as mentioned, love serves as a redemptive force in Henry V. During the war in France, Henry says some of the most memorable lines in all Shakespeare. We know many of them. "Once more unto the breach, dear friends. Cry God for Harry, England, and St. George." And of course, the St. Crispin's Day speech stand as some of the most recognizable lines in all Shakespeare. And it's all occurring in a single play and in 2 acts. That is what testifies to the rhetorical genius of Shakespeare. Yet the memorable lines of Henry's rhetoric come when Henry is at his worst. He is a warrior, threatening to butcher thousands of innocent civilians in his conquest of town after town. His infamous St. Crispin's Day speech combines inspiration with shame. Those men in England still in bed, not on campaign, will look upon the veterans of this upcoming battle with shame and humiliation when they see the veterans' scars, and therefore hold their manhood cheap in the presence of those who fought and won with Harry at Agincourt. Upon close inspection, King Harry is very far from the Christian king he claims to be. He has unleashed famine, sword, and fire over the world. Bloodshed dominates most of the play. But another side of Harry is revealed at the end of the play, with his courtship and marriage to Princess Catherine, which brings to the play serenity. Peace is finally restored through the love that Harry has for Catherine. Conspiracy and war dominate the first 4 acts. Peace, serenity through marriage brings the play to its conclusion. Here, Henry offers no memorable speech. All he musters up is a simple "I love you." The love of Harry and Kate bind kingdoms together and brings an end to the famine, sword, and fire unleashed by Henry earlier in the play. Love here is the resolutory redemption, and it brings peace to a world at war. Conquest cannot bring peace. War cannot bring fulfillment. Only love can do that. The Merchant of Venice also concerns itself with love, even though most of the play seems to be concerned with a petty squabble and the questions of justice. Portia and Bassanio are in love, but their love is troubled by larger socio-political issues that drives the plot of the play. The animosity between Shylock and Antonio, the lack of mercy and forgiveness, threatens to destabilize Venice, and therefore our 2 lovers. It takes the intervention of mercy through Portia to end the feuding that prevents love from flourishing within the social order. Without that quality of mercy that Portia extols in the infamous court scene, a functioning civil society, which is predicated on love, cannot exist. And if a functioning civil society predicated on love cannot exist, that means love itself can never be consummated within society. The play ends, as we know, with Portia forgiving Bassanio, who has given away the ring Portia gave him as a seal of their love. Forgiveness is the key to reconciliation, and reconciliation is completed in the joy of marriage and the hope it offers the world. Venice has been under a chaotic spell throughout the play. Our characters have been caught up in that maelstrom. The love that Portia and Bassanio have for each other, consummated through marriage, brings the play to its conclusion, offering a profound hope for our characters and the city at large. Only love in marriage offers that hope, just as it offers redemption, as it did to Henry in his play. Reading Shakespeare in light of theology is a must for adults and students alike, for it is through understanding the philosophies and the theologies of love that Shakespeare is wrestling with and presenting for us that we can see how not all forms of love are the same. The materialistic and Epicurean love is ultimately a false and unfulfilling love. A lust that we confuse for love will also lead to our demise. Instead, the only love that brings contentment, fulfillment, peace, and happiness is the rationality of love, found in a sacrifice for our beloved, as well as how love leads us to renounce war and conquest. Love, in its purest reality, binds all things together in a family. It unites humans, the world, and the cosmos together as one harmonious whole that brings new life into a world often governed by famine, sword, fire, madness, death, and destruction. It is not politics, it is not economics, it is not courts of law that will bring hope to the world. It is love and love alone that is our great hope.